Piece of the planet. You know what it is? A piece of the bishop. So sorry. Both of us got hemmed up. He was being the Silicon Valley G that he is. I was getting him back from the talk that I gave at Albany State University, which went fantastic. Shout out to everybody at ASU down in Albany, Georgia. And so now we're back. It is Money Mondays, and we are here. But we're not talking about money straight like we normally do. I know you've known these last few have dealt with like other things like communication, how to learn better and things like this. Now we're talking about something major, major. You know, I call myself the anti-guru for a reason. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I never do. I never will. I'm trying to find answers as I point you in some of the directions that help me. That's all this podcast is ever meant to be. And so today's podcast is about trauma, right? And this is something that actually David knows a lot about, and this is good. And when we talk about men's mental health, and the mental health of the people that we love, we have to acknowledge that almost everybody you know has gone through something you don't know about. Almost everybody you know has taken on an emotional or psychological wound that has warped them in some way, maybe either in the way that they see themselves or the way they see the world around them. And so this is why I'm always encouraging you to go to therapy, right? Like always seek some kind of therapy because you need someone to help you kind of figure it out. You don't have to stay forever, but it's important, especially if you're an adult and especially if you already know that you have taken some damage in some way. So David, thank you so much for coming on to Bishop Chronicles. Really happy to have you back on and really knowing that this particular topic is crucial.
It's great to be back. I actually missed last week. I was busy. You were busy. So we took the week off. I was like, I was having like the withdrawal symptoms. Like I can stop anytime. It's okay.
No,
I was one of those Meta Bishop Chronicles treatment programs for the last few days, but it's all right. I'm good.
Nah, dude, I'm really glad you're back. But you know, like why trauma literacy is a life skill. This is a really crucial topic because I would say it anyway, but I definitely believe like in the ripple effect of what COVID did to the planet and specifically like America and the UK, like we got to have bigger conversations.
I would like to actually start with the conclusion of what I would like to get people to today at the beginning, because I don't want people to click off saying, oh, I thought this was about how to invest in a Roth IRA. I'm going to go find something else to do. I put this deliberately as one of the core skills for a reason. And it is equal, if not superior, to financial literacy and learning literacy and the other things we're going to talk about. And I would like to turn to entrepreneurship starting next week. So I want to get people into that. That's actually my real passion. So let me tell you a story, and then I'll give you, I think, are three answers to the question. So going back to when I was an undergraduate at Stanford and a law student, I had two parallel paths. So as an undergraduate at Stanford, I taught in the computer science department, studied innovation and technology policy, and at law school did a lot of research on how intellectual property law helps promote global development and economic empowerment and can reduce poverty, especially in emerging countries. In parallel, at Stanford, I did a lot of original research on gender-based violence. I worked on the Federal Violence Against Women Act. I was a rape crisis counselor, and in law school helped write a legal treatise on how to decrease gender-based violence. So you have these two parallel paths, which most people see as disparate and unconnected. And people looked at me like I was an alien. Like, what is that weird technology stuff? Or what is that weird violence stuff? Like, what's wrong with you? But to me, it has never been two careers. It's been one project. The project is, how do you create opportunity and equality? How do you allow people to dream, imagine, and put their vision into the world? One denies systematically access, not just to individuals, but entire populations. And the other is what you do with that freedom to self-actualize and put your vision into the world. So I think there's three urgencies here. One is there is an urgent issue of equality. And we don't typically speak of violence and poverty and trauma and scarcity as an equality issue, but it's the greatest threat to civil rights on the planet. And I will make that case, I hope, by the time we're done. If not, then I have failed. But you cannot fix inequality and access to opportunity if you do not understand what trauma physiologically at a brain level does to the people inside of the problem. And it's not just individuals, it's entire populations. It's an urgent issue of relationships. You cannot love other people or even love yourself if you do not have trauma literacy. The vast majority of people have some relationship with trauma themselves. And even if they don't, they're going to be in a relationship or lead or be in a team of people who do. And you cannot love and have meaningful relationships if you don't understand this. And it's an urgent issue of control. I don't mean control like, oh, I'll be the narcissist controlling, because usually that's a trauma response. But how are you going to run your life? Either you run your life or the unprocessed trauma runs it for you, or the unprocessed trauma of the people in relationships does it for you. And it's a common story among many men that I know that their relationships got ruined, not necessarily from what happened to us, but what happened to people we loved. And so you're going to be picking up the damage and the child support payments and the spousal payments for decades if you don't understand this. So I think this is an urgent life issue, and you can't function effectively as someone who wants to put your vision into the world and have control over your life if you don't understand this issue. So that's the case. And I've made a lot of controversial statements without the evidence, but let's maybe spend the next 40 minutes backfilling what I just started with.
No, that's perfect. I'm going to step off and grab a book because there's some data about this that I want to share that comes out of a book that Archbishop Desmond Tutu wrote before he died. And so keep talking. I'm going to grab the book.
Okay. Well, while you grab the book, let me just kind of give more of a background here. So I've mentioned before that I grew up poor, and I've also mentioned in the money episodes how a scarcity mentality changes who you are and changes your relationship with money. So let me make two statements. One, how we have a scarcity tax on the brain from a lack of money. And the secondly, how we have a scarcity trap, which is once you are at the bottom of the well, you tend to get trapped there. So I mentioned earlier these two economists, and this is the book, it's called Scarcity. It's 300 pages of economists saying, oh, wait a minute, actually having lack of resources really does affect people. This is not psychologists, and it's clear that they aren't because they miss a lot of obvious issues. But what they found is that when you have chronic scarcity of any resource, which isn't just money, but love or human connection or time, it costs you. So it can cost you in cognitive impairment, 13 IQ points. You can become consumed by survival because evolutionarily, that's what the brain does, right? So that you're focused on this one issue. It eliminates executive control. It short circuits decisions. It leads to impulsive behavior. You temporally discount, meaning the future doesn't feel real. You just want to do what feels good today, what you need to do today. We avoid hard decisions. We have a flooded brain. We don't plan. We become hyper-focused on the immediate threat. I said before, but I want to say it again in this context, these are not character flaws. They are predictable results of our physiology. Our brain was not wired for happiness or for a surfeit of consumer credit or being able to survive in a world of social media. It was survived to keep us alive on the African savannah for 200,000 years. Yeah. So, we can test differently and perform differently when we are flush with cash versus when we are poor. So there are real physiological effects. And the problem is, once you're poor or have a lack of resource, these behaviors trap you there.
No, it's absolutely real.
You return to bad habits, you relapse. We have this belief that the poor are poor because they're moral failures. They are lazy. They make bad decisions. They spend the lottery winnings buying new cars instead of investing in Roth IRAs. And I will tell you, as someone who grew up poor in poor neighborhoods, a lot of people I grew up with have remained trapped in poverty, and they do look like moral failures. But the trick is they're not poor because they're failures. They had their brains rewired because of poverty, which has trapped them forever. And unless we come up with ways to get them out, they will just go back. I've had many friends, and I've told you these stories before, where say they're in $20,000 of debt, and I've given them structures to get out of debt, to create new jobs, but they're right back where they are in a year.
No, it's true. It's true. And, I know people sometimes really hate AI, but I encourage you to go online and ask AI, what do we know about trauma and the actual brain and how it impacts it? And you'll be shocked. And say, I want you to cite, university studies that are reputable within the last 10 years. And just in the last 10 years, a lot has been discovered and continues to be. So before we get too deep, there's a book. I don't know if it's going to show up. It's called The Book of Forgiving. This is by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter. And they have a section where it's explaining, and again, this may be premature because, people's pain haven't been acknowledged, but this idea of the science of forgiving, right? And it says, during the past decade, there has been more and more research into forgiveness. And it starts breaking down how even neuroscientists are studying the biology of forgiveness and exploring evolutionary barriers in the brain that hinder the act of forgiving. Some are now even looking to see if there might be a forgiveness gene somewhere out in our DNA. And it breaks down all these different things that happen. There's a second book called It Didn't Start With You, about generational trauma and how it carries in the body and how it carries particularly in the mind. And one of the things that they talk about is that if you cannot come to grips with certain traumas and you suppress them, heart attack, cancer rates, stroke rates, these things spike. And again, you don't believe me, put it in your favorite AI tool and you will be shocked. And so that's why this episode is really crucial, guys. It's really crucial.
There's like 8 things in that I need to respond to, but the old sports adage, they play it one game at a time. Well, the reason you do is if you played all the games at once, it's really bad for TV ratings. But I don't know what order to go through that on, because there's so much there.
Yeah, I mean, there really is, man. It's an important thing. And I think for so many men who struggle, and again, I was just on the Bishop Chronicles IG, and I was saying, look, it's not stoic to abuse women, be mean to women, to even observe women being abused and do nothing is not something that a stoic, would or should do. And you would be shocked at how many weirdos popped up calling me a simp, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why would this be okay? And the thing is that so many men are falling for fake stoic content that tells them not to be emotional, that tells them to ignore how they feel. And all of that does is make it worse. And it's not what the Stoics taught. Like, it's bad for them mentally, and it's not what the Stoics taught.
Well, all right. I want to be systematic, but let me just react to that last point, and then let's kind of go through these in order, because I want to get to all of it, but it's you threw me 8 things at once, which I love.
I'm sorry. It's
no, this is good. This is what we're supposed to do. So there is a way that we have confused masculinity with exploiting the trauma, in particular of women in our lives, and with confusing power and authority with real manhood. And let me just give a weird example here for a second. So I was talking with a project recently that was trying to do something for boys in grade school. And it's all run by women. And they have these ideas of how to unlearn toxic masculinity. And I said, okay, what is non-toxic masculinity? Because, think of these boxes like toxic masculinity, non-toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, non-toxic, this grid. And what they described to me was being a girl. And I'm like, well, that's not going to fly. And I don't even believe that.
Right.
So there are things about being a man that are worth saving: the desire to protect, the desire to create, the desire to improve. Not that women can't have these too, right? But there are things worthy of us as men,
absolutely,
that we should not throw away, because that has become tangled up in this ball of violence and degradation.
And what we call toxic masculinity just isn't masculinity.
Well, it's not masculinity, because look, this is maybe where I mentioned, I think previously, I had taught a program at a Jesuit community center for first generation immigrants. And sort of as preparation for that, I went on TikTok, which I feel like I had to take a shower after. I was so polluted. It's like, what are they learning about relationships? Because the program was about trauma and communication. And I was appalled, because what the videos were effectively teaching men is, here's how you run game on women's trauma.
Dude,
here's how, the book, the playbook. I'm not saying men are predators, because let's be very careful here. There are predators in this world, and they know how to pick their victims, and they know how to prey upon women's insecurities and feelings of solitude and unlovability and toxic shame, typically because they're survivors of abuse. They know how to pick, the predators had to pick that like lone sheep out of the herd to pick on.
Oh yeah.
But here's my point. A lot of those behaviors trickle down to, like, you know, you dilute them like with water, 95%, so there's still 5%. The things you're taught, like nagging women or treating them with disrespect or being intermittent with them, like not responding quickly and saying certain things to them, is a low version of how do we run game on women who will respond to that. Now, for what it's worth, and if you are a kind man, you're going to be punished in life by women seeking out bad boys.
Yeah.
All the time. And that's also a trauma response on the part of women, which I didn't understand. I was full of anger in my early 20s that I was exactly the kind of man I thought that we wanted in the world. That I was strong and a leader and overachiever, and I was dominant and could control a room, but I also was someone who had kindness and would care about equality and would do things both domestically and in relationships that did emotional work, the things that everyone says they want, but then they go have sex with the varsity athlete who beat them or was verbally abusive.
Dude, it's so real.
But it's a trauma response. And again, I'm getting a little ahead of the story here today, but seeking out return to trauma is exactly what you would predict. And so let me go back to college for a second. So when I was working on a rape crisis hotline, you think it's like new people every week. It's actually not. It's mostly the same people who call all the time, right? And you get frustrated at the time. Or this is the late 1980s, early 90s. So I'm dating myself a bit, where we're like, God, you could believe she went back to her abuser again. Can you believe that?
You're back.
She went back to the jerk. And at the time we had no language about it. And then this book came out. It's called The Body Keeps the Score, which is like the more sophisticated version of the Oprah Winfrey book you mentioned earlier.
Right.
And he studied Vietnam. So Van der Kolk is the guy who wrote this. It's one of the most important books I think ever written, at least of the last 50 years.
It's important stuff.
He studied like Vietnam veterans, which are a little different than, you know, men and women are different, but let's ignore that for this purpose.
Right.
What he was able to describe at a neurochemical and biological level, which I'll get into because you should at least understand the mechanism, perfectly described the women I grew up with, my mom, you know, my female relatives, friends, as well as people on the hotline. Like, it is the most predictable thing you return to people who hurt you because that's what's understandable. That's what you think love is. In fact, the fear circuitry of your entire brain is rewired through trauma such that it suppresses your ability to understand safety and love and connection as anything you can even feel. What does light your brain up physiologically is chaos and abuse. So the more you love and the more you give to somebody who's unable to accept or take it, the more they will not respect you and the more they will seek out someone else who does light that pattern up. And so there is a whole issue that if you understand the raw numbers of sexual abuse of girls and teenagers, it has a profound effect on what happens to women in their 20s and what happens to men in their 20s.
No question.
And we don't talk about this. So I understand now, like if I could go back and talk to my 20-year-old self, I'd say, okay, you're right to be frustrated and you're right to feel like you're doing all the right things and the jerks are getting all the women.
Yep.
But that's because of what happened to them. And
yeah,
it's not what's wrong with them. The question isn't what's wrong with them. The question is what happened to them.
I was too young to understand a lot of what it meant to observe a damaged woman and not really know what the implication of what they just said are. Oh yeah, my dad's bipolar and so is my sister. I don't know what that means. I just think you go to a doctor and be like, when I was 7, but that's all my brain at that time. That's what I thought happened. And you would just say what happened when you were 7 and the doctor would give you a prescription or tell you why it was okay. And you just went on. I didn't understand that, you know, mental health in a family line can be passed. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what to look for. And then there's those gaps where, you know, that's just how she is. That's just how we are. No, dude, that's not healthy. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's real.
Yeah, well, the trauma hides in plain sight. all over the place, and people we have to work with in business, or family members, or people we love. The partner who picks a fight when things are going well, they want to sabotage because they felt unsafe in childhood, and conflict feels like home, and safety feels like a rejection of who they think they are. The kid who won't talk isn't necessarily defiant. Maybe they're in freeze mode. The person who goes back to the abusive ex. The brain seeks what it learned to survive. Sometimes there's rage out of proportion to the trigger. You're flooded. That's not necessarily malice. It's that the trigger reopened a memory the brain never closed, because physiologically that's what happens. And let me come back to that. Or maybe there's a relative who controls every detail, but they're compensating for an earlier powerlessness. Control's the only safety they know. We diagnose character. We should be diagnosing wound. We diagnose character. It should be wound. And what happened to you, not what is wrong with you.
It's really real. And I'll just say to everybody on here right now, I don't care what's going on in your relationship, right? If the person you love hates either parent, y'all need therapy and they need therapy. You better pay attention, y'all. If that person has a father wound that they do not address proactively with therapy, reading, books, groups, whatever, it's fixing to go AWOL, y'all. Pay attention. If you love a guy who's like, I hate my mom, back away from him now, right? If he's not working on himself, if he's not reading books, if he's not in a men's group and therapy, like consistently, you need to understand that there's no level of idealization that can save you from the roller coaster that's coming. May come in a year, may come in 10 years, may come in 20 years, the roller coaster's coming.
I may modify that a little bit. Like I legitimately hated my dad, but he's a true monster of this world. Literally, when he died, no one's life was poorer. Like everyone's life became richer for his absence, because he was just, all he did was hurt people. Because sometimes, again, monsters exist in the world. We pretend they're not. But let me go back to the physiology for a second, because I think this is important, because we tend to dismiss a lot of this as like feelings and touchy-feely and new age crystals, and it's not. This is brain physiology, y'all.
Don't hate on crystals, man. I like
so I'm a scientist by training. I gotta, I made fun of someone recently, a woman, about horoscopes, and she said, "You all got fantasy football. You don't get to make fun of horoscopes." I was like, okay, fine. But I don't think fantasy football explains my life course today. In any event, so this is very, very quick, but and if you do want to go deep on this, go to Claude and have it give you a tutorial on the physiology of trauma. But scarcity and trauma are very related, because your body can't distinguish whether it's lack of money or you're being beaten. I mean, they're all connected from the way your brain responds. But I'm going to talk about the amygdala, which is a part of your brain. I'm going to use it as a shorthand for the entire fear circuitry of your brain.
Okay.
So if there's a real neuroscientist, don't send me hate mail. I know it's complicated. This is a podcast, so chill out, okay? So it's basically, the amygdala is your brain's alarm system. If there's a fire, if there's something happening, you don't have time to have an entire prefrontal cortex debate about, well, there's this option and this option. You have to act like now. There's a fire, there's a predator, there's a threat. Right. Everything shuts down and goes offline to deal with the threat. Your prefrontal cortex, literally, the part that is thinking and planning, deciding, goes offline. And the part that encodes memories, the hippocampus, another part of the brain, also goes offline. Right. Cortisol floods your body, adrenaline surges. You are in survival, not thinking mode. So this has implications. And let me give you just a few. One is, you're not making rational decisions necessarily. I mean, they're rational in the sense that you're trying to survive. But what if it's not a threat? What if it's something that is a misreading? You're overreacting, you're flooding, you're full of rage, you're disproportionate to what the situation actually justifies. The other thing is, let me go back to the memory encoding, because this is important. We talk about triggers today. Everything's a trigger. Oh, I was triggered because you mentioned poverty, and it's like, let me talk about what a trigger really is physiologically. A trigger is something that brings you back to a moment of time which never got resolved. So think of the canonical, like, rape survivor for a moment. What do we think about when we think of like TV shows, like, police dramas or crime dramas? Like, she's on the stand, the memories aren't there, she doesn't quite have it right, it's out of order, she has gaps and blackouts. Yeah. Right? Well, that's what happens when your hippocampus is shut down physiologically. Memory is not encoded linearly. You think more affectively. There's gaps.
Can I tell you something?
And it never closed. So if something reminds you, like you see that RV camper that you were raped in as a girl, you're back at 6 years old.
It's going to be bad.
Because the memory never got encoded. So literally your body will react with a higher pulse. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing goes up, you're spiked with cortisol because your body doesn't know that happened 30 years ago. It's happening in real time right now. That is a trigger.
No, dude, it's real. Now, there is a book I want to talk about really quick that is super important and everybody needs to get it. And I don't even know. Sure. Triggers. Okay. This book, Triggers, is imperative for everybody. Right? Whether you feel like you're a David Richo, it's like rich with an O on the end. It may be said as Rico. I've never really understood it. Anyway, this guy's book is imperative. I don't care who you are in life. If you are struggling mentally or you are in love with someone who is, you need to read this book. And I'll give you an example of what you just talked about. I do not have a linear memory of the last like 30 years. I know certain things about my life, but I can only recall them in fragments that are not in line. So like if you ask me about what I was doing when I was 38, I can't tell you. I know I was 38 because I'm here now. I know I was married and I know where I lived. But unless a granular memory is present, right? Like a birthday or, you know, a time we had dinner or whatever, I don't have that memory. Like I lost a lot of my memory and I don't even understand why this is the case. I think after the divorce, what happened was because even though I'm horrible at math, I have a brain that's always trying to quantify a thing. And so what I believe is that the part of my brain that can quantify it shut off, because if I could, it knows the rest of me might break down. So it's like we can't open that closet because you won't be. So I have the memory of my life is absolutely in what you said. It is fragmented. It is not linear, and I know that it existed. I know that whatever is happening existed because I existed, but those details are in like unwrappable chunks that I get at will as needed. It's not on tap.
That's actually normal. As someone who did know you when you were 38, you were actually running programs in Title I high schools to help at-risk youth become their best selves. So you were a person to be proud of at that age. And
yeah, but it's weird to have those blind spots though. Like those blind spots are very weird. And again, that doesn't mean that I didn't know I was married, I had kids, where I lived, where I worked, but like, yeah, it's all fragmented. And so this is why I'm telling you guys, therapy. This is why I'm telling you guys, read books, meditate, read Stoicism. Like there's no stone you should leave unturned in regards to your healing from trauma.
Yeah. I mean, there's 4 common responses. You know, we think of fight or flight. You know, I'm going to fight back or I'm going to run. And from a male perspective, that's the way we've kind of been coded to think. But there's 2 more. And I mentioned this, I think, in a previous podcast here, which is freeze or fawn, which women tend to do more. I'm not trying to reduce gender to how you respond to trauma, but as a stereotype, I will shut down and go blank, or I will people please, because the predator will kill you is what women kind of learned over. And so that works.
Yep.
The person who says yes to everything isn't necessarily agreeable. Sometimes they're surviving. The person who freezes and shuts down isn't necessarily stonewalling you. They don't have to process in real time.
They're overwhelmed.
And so a lot of the communication tools that I taught you in previous sessions don't necessarily work if they're triggering a whole trauma response. You think they're stonewalling and shutting down. They're trying to process and can't, and you have to accommodate that. You know, look, everyone has a window in which we can function. Inside that window, there's clear thinking, regulated emotions, sound decisions. Outside, we're flooded, frozen, shut down, or worse.
Mm-hmm.
And trauma narrows that window. The smaller the window, the faster we flood, and the less capability we have to cope. And everything you communicate with someone in crisis, whether it's a loved one, whether it's someone you work with, whether it's an investor, follows from this. Because I will tell you, even in the business world, trauma explains a lot of the way people behave, even if it's just episodic trauma around a specific, ad hoc incident.
No, it's real, man.
It changes us.
So, we've talked about how you grew up poor and how that's kind of like impacted you. And we've talked about the passing of your father and how it opened, in a weird way, a lot of doors for a lot of like healing, you know what I mean? And different levels of progress. Like, can I ask you, what is it that helped open the door for closure with who your father was and whatever relationship you had with him?
There's a lot of, I don't know if we have time to really get into healing from trauma. That's
it's a thing.
That's actually the second half of this book. The first half is diagnosis. The second half is what do you do about it? It's not going to leave you in a fetal position, puddle on the floor by the end, because you'll have some hope. But at least for me, and I'm one person, and I don't think my life is actually representative. I think teaching me is teaching the exception that doesn't work for most people. But for me, the greatest thing that helped me get out, well, really two things. One is the capacity to see outside and say, this is wrong. One of the greatest reactions people have, and I don't mean great as in it's a good thing, but one of the most common, I should say, one of the most common reactions is, if the person who was supposed to love me didn't love me, it's my fault. I'm unlovable. If people knew my true self, I would not deserve love and probably shouldn't be on this planet. And so I should end this. Because I'm ultimately, if I'm revealed, a fraud and worse than worse.
Right.
And so I never had that. I mean, for whatever ego reason, and this is a very gendered thing because women typically don't have the ego. I have an ego the size of Texas, as my girlfriend often says, and but that was a survival mechanism too, right? I never said I deserve this. I said, you are a monster. You deserve whatever level of hell Dante never imagined for what you were doing to every person in your life and what you did to your sisters growing up and what you did to my mom in the room next to me, which I had to hear every night. I never once blamed myself. And that's an unusual thing. And that's not, and you can't teach that, right? It just is. And the second thing is active rebellion, because people who fight back in some way, there's at least some embryonic research which says they're able to heal and process faster because they don't internalize it. And that's also a gendered response. Like, my sister didn't really have that option emotionally. I did. Like, I would try even at 7 to fight back, and you're going to lose that fight as a 7-year-old boy with your dad.
Right.
But I will rebel against this. I will do something active. And so one of the things I take from that, and we should talk about population trauma in a minute because I'd like to get to that. But and some of the work I do today, teaching how you combine innovation and policy and trauma analysis, together, you create agency for the populations you're trying to change. Meaning, instead of here's white savior, first world guide parachuting in, you're welcome. Here's what you can do yourself to be in control of your problems and begin to solve them. And that's not a small thing. First of all, they'll always know it better, but there's also another agenda, which is you're giving them the power over their own solutions, which is the first step in saying you're no longer powerless. Trauma is a form of saying you have no power over your life. So restoring that is actually a predicate. Safety and power are two of the most important things you have to give back to people who've had them stripped. So I don't think I'm extrapolatable, but there are things I think are useful from what worked for me that you can design into policy and are actually proven to work. Expecting that, however, from people is unrealistic. Because most of the people I grew up with, including my extended family, prisons, halfway homes, juvenile facilities, suicide. But I can't remember I told this on the podcast, or I just said it offline, but one of my best friends growing up committed suicide recently. And it was more or less, I don't want to say inevitable, but from the moment of his birth, he was almost condemned. And it was just a matter of time. He was more talented in every way, higher IQ, more artistic, more creative, but he didn't have those coping mechanisms.
Yeah, it's I've written about my suicidal times at different times in my life, from very young to going through the early parts of my divorce or whatever. But I'll never commit suicide. I I understand why I felt that way at the time. It's not something I will ever do. So, hey, if I end up on some, that boy killed himself, don't believe it. But what I'm telling you is, like, you know, I understand that darkness. I understand where it comes from, and it's part of the reason why I do this podcast. Because, what I try to tell people who have gone through a lot is that, the problem with that unprocessed trauma and the way that it like speaks to you to do negative things, whether it's some level of self-harm like cutting or like actual suicide or whatever, is that those conversations kind of calcify into facts in your mind, but they're not facts. But if you just let that darkness hamster wheel be the conversation that you have with yourself, they're like, yeah, man, nobody cares, bro. I mean, if you just jumped in front of the train, I mean, right? And you'll be like, yeah, it totally makes sense. And you have to be around people, and you have to listen to whatever's on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, Instagram, and reprogram that language, because it will always betray you. That darkness, it always betrays you. It always leaves a lot of facts out, important facts. And so it took a lot of craziness for me, like working out all the time, doing all kind of stuff to kind of like try to reprogram the pleasure neurons in my brain. Like I remember I was like, if I think about the divorce too much, I'm going to do 10 push-ups, 10 squats, and 10 crunches until I could sleep. Because, the insomnia would just like keep me up, and I would work out until I would sleep. And so it's like, over time, exercising did reset those pleasure neurons. They did, right? But again, with therapy, with meditation, with reading, like you have to be almost obsessed in a non-selfish way with healing, and you have to know that it's possible. I
just want to mention this quickly. So one also, in addition to self-harm, and cutting and suicide are a little different in terms of what they're trying to do for your brain, but not an important distinction right now. Addictions and what I call self-medication is another common response, like alcoholism, drugs, pornography addictions, gambling addictions, screen addiction, food, overeating. These are nervous system regulation tools. People who study addictions often see a common pattern, which is this is what helps them feel calm or numbs the pain. And so you have to find alternate mechanisms. I mean, roughly, again, this is outside today's scope. Maybe we have a follow-up program, but right. There's kind of three things you have here at your disposal. One is, pharmacological, which is like, hey, here's some pills, may feel a little better. You won't have sex anymore, but that's all right. And they may not work anyway because they work on 20% of the physiology of your neurotransmitters. SSRIs are dark magic that are terrible in so many ways. There's talk therapy, which by itself typically isn't also very useful. And then there's somatic or physiological things. And a lot of what actually is proven to work are these things in combo. Yeah. So you have to actually heal the underlying damage of what's happened to your brain, and that could be through things called EMDR, or in some cases certain physical activities, even like play therapy, rap battles. I mean, these things are actually proven to have some effect.
To your point, there's a rapper named 8Ball from the South. He had this great triple album, but he was in a group called 8Ball and MJG. He was recently on a podcast where he talked about how he plays with Legos, because how Legos are all like, you can do Lego bonsais or Japanese huts or whatever. Like he does it all the time. There's a guy who's he runs 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. I'm blanking on his name right now. He talked about how when he's trying to like lean back from all of the training and everything, that he does Legos. There's all kinds of play that help this part of yourself. And I always tell anybody, men, women, children, whatever, but I'm specifically adults, I'm like, if you used to draw, go start drawing again. If you used to love calligraphy, start doing calligraphy. If you used to make beats on beat machines, start making beats. Get a set of turntables. Play handball. Go play tennis. Like, go color in coloring books, right? And you'd be like, man, I can't be 45 going in, get buy a coloring book. No, you have to do that. That kind of stuff is really good for your brain. And you have to find multiple levels of ways to calm yourself, not because there just is more than one way. You want to have as many tools in your internal toolbox to heal as possible.
Well, you're also, I mean, I'll say this. I had a conversation with someone a few years ago who was talking about all the days of his childhood he couldn't wait to relive if he could. Like if he had a magic wand, he would want to relive so much. And I said to him, and I meant it seriously, there's not one day before I was 18 I'd want to relive. Not one. There's one I thought about, but even that I don't want to. And so people who, as adults, take up things that are frivolous or silly or bring joy or play, sometimes didn't have that childhood.
Yeah.
And, you know, when all the neighbor kids would come over to my house, we'd build pillow forts and tear the whole place up. And the other parents were aghast.
Right.
Like, oh my God, my kid tore up your house. I'm like, it's like 5 minutes to clean up. Who cares? They're kids.
Yeah, no one minds. Yeah.
Like, we're good. I mean, yeah, they got the crayon on the couch. It sucks. Whatever. It's a couch. It's a couch. Because that's something I never had. And so giving yourself also the chance to relive in clothes and say, this is how it should have been had someone cared about you. This is what it should have been if you cared about joy. This is what it should have been if you felt safe. Matters. That matters. And again, just to say it again, when that fear circuitry goes off, your brain lights up from danger, even when the danger is no longer present. So you seek it out.
Yeah.
And joy and safety doesn't feel anything to you. It means nothing. It's empty. It's void. So for people who've been through trauma to seek out that high again, I have a friend who works at the VA hospital and she works with veterans, and she tells this story where she works with veterans who have been through war zones and they keep seeking out dangerous situations. And her job is to get them to stop because many of them are self-harming situations or they're harming other people.
That makes a lot of sense.
And so this is the story she says. There was a veteran who said, well, how will I ever feel this way again? How will I ever feel this alive again? How will my brain ever light up this way again?
Right.
And she says, it never will. Nothing else will ever replace that. And that's the sad fact. The best way to treat trauma is have it never occur in the first place. Which is also why, as men, we need to stand up to other men who hurt other people.
I'm trying to tell you, bro. Look, if you go on an IG and you see the guys who are starting to pop up on my page and say stuff, it's frightening that you could make a video saying, hey, it's really bad if you're a man and you observe violence towards women, you just sit there, you think it's cool. And someone's like, man, you sound soft. Bro, trauma.
We are depriving ourselves. I mean, I know women watch this. I don't know what the numbers are because we don't have Nielsen ratings.
It's a decent number, but I don't know.
But I know from the responses I get, it's about 40% women because I do a lot of emails.
Yeah.
But if we want a world where we are able to have human relationships the way we want with healthy people, we need to collectively chip in here.
And we need to put in for real.
I remember when I used to do programs like in law school where I went to like NYU or York University in Toronto, and I'd teach programs on civil rights and gender-based violence. And I'd be invited to like all these like, you know, I guess think tank things with leading researchers. And I was one of the only men in the room.
Yeah.
And I would make the following statement. I would say, there is a way that we are making only helping survivors of violence the only thing we do as the most noble thing we can do. And it's important, which is why I do this. And I want to talk about your shirt in a second because there's a motto I have that it triggers, and we need to do that. However, if we can stop one man from abusing women, that may be 30 women over the course of his life we've helped.
I'm trying to tell you, dude, it's so real.
And I was literally almost booed off the stage and shouted out of the room for saying this.
Wow.
When prevention is the only thing that works for something that is effectively incurable. You can contain it. You can help people live better. We're costing our economy over the world trillions of dollars, and human potential wasted, and wasted relationships. Think of all the drama and nonsense that you've gone through in your life, either because of your or someone else's trauma. Like how many bad relationships have you had? And, you know, we make jokes like narcissist, but like, you know, this is childhood trauma. We are not doing ourselves a favor as men by not creating a world where we are proud to live among the women and other men in it.
Yeah. And create a world where they're happy we were around. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's really, it's really interesting to have this conversation today because literally 2 days ago, I was talking with a friend who was getting into it with his lady, and he goes, "You know what, man? Like right now, like this was a guy over 40 who is single. He's over 40, and he was like, right now, a big part of being in any relationship with a woman is being a therapist." He said, and if you don't know how to be a therapist for that woman, you're gonna struggle. And I think that he's right, but I also think it goes both ways. And that what it really comes down to is, at the end of the day, no matter how cool you think somebody is, or how much you think you have in common, or how much love or whatever, listen, if you are not healing and or proactively trying to heal, and if you're not with somebody that is healing and or proactively trying to heal, I mean measurably, not just saying, "Oh, try," like reading, therapy, books, meditation, retreats, whatever they do, right? And it can't just be like, "The gym is my therapy, bro." Or it can't just be the mats when I do jujitsu. Like, if you're not doing proactive healing, you're in danger. And if you're not with somebody that's trying to proactively heal, you're in danger.
Yeah.
That's how I feel right now.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, a few thoughts there.
It's going to spin out bad.
Yeah. I mean, empathy is a strength, not a weakness. I don't think you want to get in the therapist role in a relationship, although.
No, but you have to be able, I think, to hear and observe.
You have to be able to hear and understand.
Yeah.
But I'll say here's one border, and by there's a difference between a boundary and control.
Okay, let's go.
And a boundary says, I can understand your pain. I know what happened to you when you were 12 and 13 and 14 from your dad. I understand why you're behaving the way you are. I understand it's what happened to you, not what is wrong with you. However, you don't get to treat me this way. You don't get to become the abuser because you were abused, and that gives you a feeling of power. You don't get to shut down and hurt me in particular ways. You need to heal, and you will not mistreat me. I will be here. I will listen to you. I will be your advocate. I will give you power. I will do whatever it takes to care for you, but you will not perpetuate this. You are now an adult grown person, and you do not get to choose to put your trauma future into the world. You have a choice to make whether it ends with you or whether you're just the next person who carries it to the future generation. So that is a boundary you need to set. Is when you have someone who has suffered, you can understand their suffering and be there for their suffering, help them get their suffering resolved, but you're not here to ruin your life doing it while they take it out on you.
Yeah.
Important. That's a limit.
No, I think it's important. It's important. And, again, whether it's the Book of Forgiving. So again, that's by Desmond Tutu and Umfo Tutu. That's Umfo is his daughter. Really, it's a seriously life-changing book, man. Right? Again, what was the book you were holding up just now?
Oh, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, The Body Keeps the Score. Right? And the other one on generational trauma, I'm telling you, It Didn't Start With You. Crazy important stuff. And I know that this part of the thing isn't fun for everybody. And a lot, some of the best growth and the growth that needs to happen, it isn't the most fun, right? But the thing is that if you come into Money Mondays and you get all these things done with the investments, and you get the accounts in order, you start saving, and you get what you want. If you don't handle this part of it, it will impact the acquisition of what you think you want through the money. It absolutely will.
Totally will. I want to pick up two things I hinted at because I don't want to have people leave this podcast and think I left them hanging. So your shirt, no one is coming to save you. My life motto from when I was little was be the person you needed to save yourself when no one was there. Yeah. So no one else is coming, but I can come. And I can do it for people because I know what it's like when no one's there. That is positive masculinity.
Yeah.
Right there.
It's real.
There's nothing wrong with saying we want to make the world better and protect and improve. That is not toxic. That is what makes the world have progress.
No, it's real.
So let me also, the other thing I want to talk about was populations. We talk about it on an individual level, but I want to say, let's not just like hyper focus on individual people.
Yeah, let's talk about populations because you did.
And so like there's something called the ACEs study, ACE, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences, which is a defining set of research studies of the last 50 years where they went and interviewed children about adverse childhood experiences, which include being battered, having a parent's divorce, being unhoused. I mean, all these different things, living near the poverty level. And people who have 4 or more of these characteristics, and you can go ACE, just go on Google and download it and do the checklist yourself. People of 4 or more are known to have cardiovascular disease at epidemic levels, diabetes, autoimmune conditions, early mortality. Like, this literally shaves years off your life and causes other problems in your life. People of 4 or more of these, only 12% of the white population. However, among Indigenous Americans, it's 40%.
Yeah.
You look at people of color, it's in similar numbers. 40% in low-income housing have 4 or more. 60% of homeless have it. Trauma is not randomly distributed. It clusters along existing lines of inequality. And the reason for that is your brain does not distinguish between systematic institutional discrimination and racism, whether it's economic or race-based or gender, and an act of physical violence. More importantly, there's what's called epigenetic transmission. Like, there are studies on Holocaust survivors, slavery descendants, and others that show that you pass down through generations many of the markers of trauma. Now, that's reversible, so don't feel like your life is condemned. But historical injustice persists in current biology, and it's population-wide. And one of the things I also think is a positive masculinity tool is we care about social change. We care about improving the world we find and inherit. I've earlier mocked men because my girlfriend mocks me. She's like, I just want to be listened to. Stop solving my problem. And I ask her, like, do you want me to listen or solve? Because I want to solve. But solving problems, damn it, is what makes this incredible. And I will not apologize for that. I will shut my mouth up and say, I will listen to you. But human progress is because people said, I do not want the world the way it is, and I want it to be something extraordinary because my vision is a more just and beautiful world, and I'm going to do it. So solving problems is a positive masculine trait. And if we understand that historical injustice needs to be addressed and what prevents that from happening, it will make us better as men who want to make the world better. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm trying to get into a little TED talk here on you.
But this is the stuff we got to go through, man. This is the stuff we got to go through. This is the stuff we got to say. And we have to be clear about it because, even on this platform, there's a manosphere that has a sizable, there's a lot of them, is what I'm saying. And so I don't fear them. I'm not intimidated by them. I think these guys are a big problem. I think there's too many fake stoics. I think there's too many fake gurus. I think there's too many grifters who pretend to know about how money should be saved and spent, and they're just clowns. And it really bothers me. And that's why I really appreciate what you do. And this is why I appreciate every subscriber, paid or free. I appreciate every listener, irrespective of how they came across it, because if you look at the state of contention in this country, political, social, financial, emotional, like if you look at it, spiritual, it's heavy, and it's going to take a deliberate shift of the men who really know it to step up more consistently, but to also do it from a place of love, right? Like, I've mentioned this before, but there was a time when me and my ex-wife were talking, and I said, we really messed up as we went on in the relationship. She said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, before, when we used to fight, no matter how intensely we fought for the love. And at some point, one of us won, and I don't know if the other person felt bad about it or wanted to win as well. But once we stopped fighting for the love, everything else after fell apart. I commit to fighting for the love of anything, right? But it's genuine. So even when I'm frustrated about something that's happened in politics or the religious world or whatever, I'm still fighting from a place of love. Like, as men, we have to learn how to do that and know that it's good. And it's one of the reasons why I really like that book, The Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield, because there's a lot about that. Like, people think, oh, it's about the 300 in Thermopylae and whatever. But when you look at the role of love in that book, and when you look at the role that women play in that book, it's crucial, man. Like, we have to be getting ourselves to a place where we can unflinchingly and consistently fight for love, from love, for the betterment of people who may not eat, pray, speak, or do anything like us, vote. We have to be able to find that capacity, or we're all going to lose. That's my theory.
Well, let's tie it to science for just a second. So Harvard has an 80-year study that's still ongoing where they study what makes you happy, what's life satisfaction, what increases longevity. And there's one finding above everything else.
What
and
is
it's
it?
relationships. Not just romantic relationships, but male friendships, other friendships. It's not going out and fighting with 300 of your peers at Thermopylae and dying. I mean, like, look, if like purpose,
Sometimes we gotta go. No, just
purpose, connection, love, health are your greatest predictors of happiness, but relationships is the number one. You cannot have the relationships you want, not just romantic, but with friendships. If you don't have trauma literacy, you will misread people you love. You will misdiagnose as character when you should be diagnosing wound. You will let relationships die because of misdiagnosis. You will harden into a judge because accumulated bitterness will become the texture of all the relationships you have with people. You will never be the safe person someone needs in their life, and they will suffer alone in a room that we are in front of our eyes, and we will never know what happened. We will mistake our coping mechanisms for our identity, the workaholic, the cynic, the fixer. We will be in the cage that we created and defend it as if it is who we really are. And you will confuse numbing with peace, busyness with purpose, and control with safety. You will die earlier and sicker. Untreated trauma is a measurable metabolic, cardiovascular, and life risk factor. If you want to live a life that is worth living, trauma literacy is as important as financial literacy and leadership literacy and communication literacy. And I'll make no apologies for that statement. And if you want to go bigger, if you want equality in the world so other people can have what you have, and you want to pass it forward, you have to understand this is the barrier. It's the greatest threat to civil rights and equality in the world that we don't talk about.
damn, homie. You know what? I don't even want to talk anymore. I don't even want to talk.
Dude, it's your show. You have to talk.
I can't. I'm done. I'm done. I'm hanging it up. I'm just, nah, dude, I'm serious. That was so well said for me to try to follow up that, because it was a really clear and sober and clarifying point, man.
Look, it's one of the highest leverage moves you can make as a person. It's the difference between running your life and being run by it.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's any more that needs to be said beyond that, but
no, man, I'm good. We will be back next Monday. We're staying on it, guys, and you got to understand, like, we need each other. We do. I'll tell you two things that happened to me yesterday that I'm really grateful for. Yesterday, a college student from the United Kingdom sent me a message and said that my guided meditation on heartbreak was everything that he needed, because he was going through a bad breakup in college. I had another college student, a young man, hit me up last week and say the same thing. He was like, the timing of it, it was so crazy. Like, I felt it was for me. I know a lot of people are in pain, and that's why we're here. We need each other, right? The Resilient Men's Group, we meet Sundays at 11 a.m. from 11 to 1 online. People calling from all over the world, right? And it's good, where men can talk without judgment about love, about pain, about loss, about grief, about anger. And it's really cool. You know what I'm saying? Then I got a message from a woman who was like, oh, I haven't reached out in a while, but I wanted to let you know one of your guided meditations really got me through some painful anxiety. We're not going to stop doing what we're doing. We're not going to stop doing what we're doing. And yes, Bishop Chronicles is meant for men's mental health, but as a lover of all humanity, genuinely, this podcast is for everybody, right? It has to be, because the better that men get, the better the world gets. The more peaceful men get, the more peace will be in women's lives and children's lives and the environment and the animals. And so we have to be better, right? And this doesn't mean, again, that I'm a saint. This doesn't mean that I have some deep spiritual gifts or whatever. I'm just trying to get it through, just like you are, just like David is, just like your neighbor is, just like your boss is, right? But this journey is ours. And as long as we're here, I'm committing, as long as I am here, I am committing to try and be a better human for myself and the world around me. And I hope that on some level, all of you do too. Thank you for joining on Bishop Chronicles. I'll see you soon. Peace.